Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome to the House of Dragons, the Game of Thrones prequels, where we have our new main characters, Daemon and rhaenerya, who will compete most fiercely for the honor of sitting on the Iron Chair, which is currently occupied by a weak and flabby king, and of course, in between the intrigue, we will also catch frequent glimpses of the cake that walks, George R.R. Martin, as he delivers onto us much pointless gratuitous violence and copious quantities of tits, ass, and gentle yet determined ass fucking. Much of which was very welcome, of course, since both I and Kyle have long desired for more softcore pornography rather than plots to dominate our TV shows.
That's true, and there's no need to tell a story if you just fill it full of sex and random acts of violence.
Exactly. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to put very large black bars over all of this, but such is life in YouTube. What can I say?
we do what we must in order to make ends meet.
There is no other way. I am not George R.R. Martin, the cake that walks, so I must censor the tits and the ass. But fear not, you can feast your eyes upon Daemon and rhaenerya here. I really dislike the characters so far. Okay, I want to start with one of the things, right? One of the things that made the original Game of Thrones kind of cool was that there was a lot of build-up. It was a very slow boil until the eventual betrayal of Ned Stark. And for those who didn't know who that actor was, it came as a genuine surprise. Whereas here, we get thrust into this, and the queen's pregnant, and she has herself a cesarean, and she's dead, and the king's like, "Oi!" And then the prince is like, "Yeah, my little brother's dead," or something, or not brother, but cousin or whatever. And then he gets disowned, and then the hand is like, "Yeah, time to plot against the king." And the princess is like, "I am going to be a real boy now, and the king too." So much shit happened here, and I have no idea why or who these people are.
Yeah, the show has really no sense of pacing, and it's about an hour long, but it's sort of, the way Arch described it, that's sort of like, and then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. This is the problem with this episode. It's, and then this happened, and then this happened. It's like, there's no sense of pacing. There's no building up these characters. It's just moving from point to point to point to point to point. And it's kind of a jumbled up mess.
Yeah, we get like 2 minutes of backstory at the beginning here, and that's pretty much it. So if you don't know the story already, you are going to be hopelessly lost, but basically, Jaehaerys Targaryen was like, well, you know, I don't know which one of my children are going to inherit this shit, so... Or no, he didn't have any children, that was it. So he had to do a council, and it was between Rhaenerys, which was not his daughter, but the daughter of his son again, I think, Aemon Targaryen, or his Viserys Targaryen's male heir. And eventually it was Viserys. Like, okay, all right, that's fair enough. But then you meet his wife, who he totally loves. The show doesn't really tell us this or show us this. The only meaningful interaction is when Viserys is like, "Yeah, cut the bitch open. I want to see my son."
Give me the son. Give me the son.
That could have been built up a little bit. Like, you see her once and she's complaining, "Oh, pregnant, she's really awful," and that's the main plot of the episode. Pregnancy sucks.
And they hammer that home too, where she's like, "I hate being pregnant. Being pregnant's bad. I hate being pregnant." And it's like, okay, we get it. And then she's like, "By the way," when her husband later scenes is in the bathtub with her, or comes to see her in the bathtub, she's like, "I really hate being pregnant, by the way. Like, I really hate it. Like, I'm just going to say that I really hate it." And it's like, okay, show, we get it.
I think every conversation that has her on screen is her complaining about being pregnant.
I hate being pregnant. It's like the show is foreshadowing that she really hates being pregnant and that she's going to die. It's hammering home the point, like, she's gonna die, she doesn't like being pregnant, she hates being pregnant, but she'll do it for the patriarchy, blah blah blah. Yes. You know, and it doubles on that, and it layers it on so thick that your nose is broken. Like, it's not on the nose, it's smashed your nose.
And that is also one of the key points here, because Rhaenerya, our main character, really, the daughter, has, oh god, it is strong female character plotline 267-2B, the I want to be a knight plotline, which I wish I was a boy. Boys got to play with swords and stuff. I don't want to be a girl. Girls only get to be pregnant. And my mother complains a lot about being pregnant, so it must suck.
And being pregnant's like a battle, by the way. We need to hammer home that point.
Yeah, so when she's pregnant and she's, having her thing, they have to do a cesarean because something went wrong. There's actually knights fighting in the background. And this scene pissed me off, too, because, okay, there's a tourney, right? And there's some jousting going on, okay. Now, jousting was a sport. It was a highly ritualistic tourney. It was highly regulated and highly organized and ordered. It was for the upper nobility, and so it had to follow a great deal of rules concerning safety, etc., because these are the sons and heirs of highborn nobles. Like, the fate of the realm rests upon these motherfuckers.
Yep. So it should be, safe.
Yeah, like as safe as it gets, everything considered.
Yep.
That's why they wore specially made armor, etc. And also, of course, Daemon doesn't have a visor on his helmet, so...
Oh, his armor design is atrocious. Like, there's a lot of nights where you're watching the show and you're like, yeah, that's actually some pretty good armor. Like, the gold guard or whatever the heck they're called, they kind of look a little bit plasticky. But then there's the prince. And the prince, holy shit. His armor is atrocious. Like, just looking at it makes your spine crawl. It's like, ugh.
It is not
no
very
visor
good.
Either.
And in the middle of all of this, whilst they're having their little tourney, one person just goes a little crazy, and he loses his joust, so he walks up to the dude who beat him, tears him off his horse, and just starts a mad brawl, which eventually ends up with one of them dead on the ground after a third participant just kind of jumps in and kills them with an axe. What? Are there guards here? Are there rules in this tourney? And this repeats too, when the prince loses a joust. He too just goes like, I'd actually like to continue fighting with swords, please. Like, okay. What's the point of the joust then?
Like, there's no rules, there's murder and it's just random acts of gratuitous violence. A hallmark of George R. R. Martin, the cake that walks, as we call him. It's just pointless shock value, and this episode layers it on thick. There's no pacing. It's like, we need to have that shock value. We need the queen to get, cut open so they can get the baby out, but it doesn't matter because dead, everyone's dying. We've got the character revolving door syndrome right off the bat, which is always a good hallmark of George R. R. Martin, where nothing really matters, and you'll start to notice the plot-eccentric characters after they survive, a good few episodes.
Yep. I also got to point out the Prince Daemon cheats also in the goddamn tourney, because again, tourneys were not just free-for-all brawls. They were highly regulated affairs. You couldn't just do whatever the goddamn hell you wanted. But the idea is that it's bloody and it's violence and they're screaming, and this happens at the same time as the birth. So the idea is the birth is a battle. It's the woman's battlefield, etc. And it's not glorious. Her life is just thrown away because one of the meisters goes like, my lord, there's a secret ancient technique called the cesarean. It's like, oh, you haven't figured that one out, have you? I say.
We can cut her open, but she's totally gonna die. And then he's like, oh, I'm gonna pretend to, think about this decision about this woman I've expressed no actual emotion for. No, I've decided she's gonna die. Oh, by the way, I love you. And they hold her down. She's like, yeah, misogyny. And she's cut open.
Yes, because she screams the whole time, no, what are you doing? What are you doing to me? No. And I get it, right? I understand. It's not a nice thing, but it's so thick.
The whole cesarean thing, the whole him doing it and not having that much of a fucking problem with it. Like, they try to portray, the king's got, he's this moral dilemma, he's gonna, can he save the baby or do this thing? But, he's, staring at the camera, right, and he's like, I don't really care. He's like, just cut her open, I guess. He sits there and pauses as if pretending. And he's like, oh, by the way, I love you, and I feel totally bad about this.
Yep, don't worry.
I don't think... I don't know if it was just the actor performance or the directing or what, but, even, the most emotion you get is later when they have, a meeting after his wife's death. Not during, not the funeral, not the death itself. It's just like he doesn't really care.
They also forgot to CGI in some tears on his cheek after he'd ordered the killing of his wife. That would have been a good little touch, too.
Yeah, and that was really stupid. It's like, oh, like you know, it might not even be alive, and considering how many of them are dead. Because they established that, like, 5 in a row or whatever have died and didn't make it.
Yes. Like, 3 miscarriages, 2 stillborns, or something like that.
But don't worry, he had a dream, and because this dream, the show tries to hammer home that he cares about this dream, by the way. It's like, I had a dream that, like, this baby's gonna be a dude, and she's like, oh, it's not gonna magically grow a cock, you misogynist. It's like, okay. She unironically says that, by the way. Most of that. Oh, it's just very ham-fisted, the whole sequence.
They have to burn them because, you know, they're royalty and stuff, so the dragon is there like, I am a furnace. And the princess has to step up and order for the bodies to be burned because the father is just a weak, big, giant, goddamn softy, of course. Strong female character.
Yep, she's super strong. She's like... And they have various scenes with his daughter, his firstborn, and his only child. Where she's basically like, she knows everything. She's you know, quirky, but is super headstrong and super smart and independent. Like, it's like, okay, show, we get it. We've seen this tired old trope, you know, in every fucking show and movie the last decade and a half. I don't think anybody cares anymore, and I don't think this show will be looked at favorably.
It's getting old. Now, what else? The CGI is alright. It's okay. It doesn't look great up close, but you know, it's not terrible. The costume work is alright. Most of the armor looks serviceable, like when Prince Daemon decides, oh, like, I've gotten my brother to give me a personal army of the city guard, because I love that too. Like, everyone's like, oh yeah, Prince Daemon's pretty goddamn evil. Like, he's a maverick. Let's give him an army of like 60,000 dudes. Oh, I can't see this going wrong.
They've made nothing but mistake after mistake in what feels like a very contrived way in order to facilitate some sort of conflict that's supposed to be coming.
And speaking of shock value, Daemon then takes his new personal army into the city to just kind of randomly execute people and chop their hands off and their scrotums in one particular instance of, again, shock for the sake of shock. And the show tells you that these were totally like criminals and stuff, but there's not exactly a trial system going on here.
These gold cloaks just go around, right? He's like, all right, today there will be blood. And like they like walk up around and start beating people and chopping off their hands and heads. And the show doesn't really show that there's any sort of like, oh, this person raped somebody. No, it's just like they grab some dude and they chop his testicles off. And it's all just violence for the sake of violence, gratuitous sex for the sake of gratuitous sex, the standard hallmarks of a talentless hack. It's nothing particularly fancy, and it's kind of this dried up old trope that they're trying to drum up again that they pulled in Game of Thrones. That worked initially, but I don't think it works here. Like, it doesn't even work in the initial stage because we've already seen this. Like, I don't care. None of this matters.
Like, it just looks like they're grabbing random people off the street, and after all of this happens too, the show is again like, oh yeah, no, King's Landing is pretty terrible. Like, there's lots of like thievery and stuff going on. Like, okay, you could have showed us that before, you know, have some robberies on the street, have some people be extorted or something. But no, it's just straight up massacre.
Yep, and that goes back to the point we talked about earlier, where it just moves from point to point to point to point without actually showing you anything. It just exposition dump after exposition dump, and it's it's got this feeling of rushed, doesn't it? The whole episode, like it's trying to set things up, but not really actually go through the motions of really preparing. Because this should have been broken up, I think, into maybe 2 to 3 episodes longer in pacing.
They're in a hurry to get the story going, as we've got 3 emerging factions here. We have Daemon and Rhaenerya, of course. Rhaenerya gets made the new queen after Rhaenerya shouts his mouth off in a whorehouse, because, you know, as you do, of course. the hand of the king is sending off secret letters to me. He's a weak, flabby old bastard. Oh, doctor, would you go and find his penis for me, would you? And doctor just going like, yes, master.
Unfortunately, in that scene, she just went there and had a nice conversation. Because they're trying to paint this, like, Velaryon dude, or I can't remember his fucking name. All their names blurred for me. The king. They're trying to paint him as, like, he's a bad, misogynist patriarch. But at the same time, she shows up and he's like, oh, I'm sad. And she's like, yeah, my mom died too. And they sort of have, like, a little character moment, and he doesn't fuck her. But they try to, like, establish it.
To character, to him having an emotion. And it's him sitting there working on his enormous fuck-off model of the city.
Yeah, okay, let's double back to that. So, here's something that a lot of fantasy media have massive problems with, and that's understanding of, like, this period and its medical knowledge as well as its artistic knowledge. Because art is basically another science. He is fucking a savant. He has crafted a, like, identical replica sculpture of the entire city. And that's just kind of stuff that didn't happen that much back then because, well, not a lot of people had that sort of artistic knowledge or understanding or grasping of, like, structures and stuff like that when it came to, like, art and media. So it's really weird to see him just craft this out meticulously with no frames of reference, just by memory. They didn't do a lot of research. Like, it would be something if you had, like, a painting or a sketch to look at. But it's like a sky bird's eye view of something that he would never have seen that from that height. Except with maybe a dragon.
Well, he does ride flying lizards, so there you go. There's his reason and rationale right there.
You know, maybe a little bit of photographic memory, but that's fucking ridiculous as he's sculpting away these stones.
The show is very clearly in a hurry to, actually get on with the telling of the story, and this is treated very much so as a prologue, and much to the show's harm, I think, because the characters aren't really introduced very well at all. Like, you've also got the token diversity hire, of course, who's
oh god,
a bright silver-haired black person who's just there and is like, yes, I was the diversity hire. And you're not introduced to him. Like, who are you? Like, why are you here? You stand out a little bit like a sore thumb. Should we comment on you?
What culture are you from? Like, you're not, but you're a Targaryen? Like, okay, how did that happen? You want to talk about that? You want to establish that? And he's got his black kids and stuff, and it's like, the show tries to pay no mind to it, but it sticks out like a sore thumb because you have a culture and a society where that's not really, like, the main population. So it's one of those things that needs to be expanded upon and built up because that's actually a pretty big deal in medieval society. Because most medieval societies weren't large spanning empires that crossed multiple continents, you know? Like, even in antiquity, people didn't move around as much as you'd think. That people were actually fairly static.
So, from what I've been able to gather, this guy married Rhaenys Targaryen, because that was the other contender for the throne, and he's from the Summer Isles or something. I mean, the creators of the show outright told us why he's there. It's because they didn't want to make a story with too many white people again. Like, that's the reason why he's there.
That's a major L right there.
And he is a Velaryon, Kyle, not a Targaryen, you foolish
they're all the same. It's a George R. R. Martin story. Does it even matter in the end?
Speaking of the cake that walks, his presence is, well, it is felt rather than necessarily seen here, as it is mostly due to random pieces of nudity and hyperviolence that we see his presence here. Because you can say many mean things about the cake that walks, specifically about his, work ethic, etc. But at least he had a sense of timing. He's back in the day. He's had some problems with his characters, dying a little bit too quick as of late, but I feel like this was just... It was hyper rushed. Like, it came across as needing to get to the story very, very, very quickly, which is not beneficial. And it also leaves us with next to no information about the characters other than what the other characters are talking about. So Prince Daemon is the crazy prince, alright. But we're also being told that the city seriously was overrun by thieves and whores and etc. And I mean, he doesn't seem to have any problems finding whorehouses, so maybe he's right. Even the other councilors go like, yeah, Pete was getting pretty shitty spicy over there. So, is he wrong? Is he actually a maverick? Or is he law and order kind of guy? He also goes batshit on the knight and the tourney, but I mean, other people do that too, so...
Yeah, everybody does that. There's also a scene when the Valyrian, or not the Valyrian, goddamn, the king is basically expelling him from the area because his council's convened about him, blabbing in the whorehouse about celebrating that he was the heir for a day because his son and wife died. And he basically goes there like, you never trusted me, like, I'm the one who looks out for you and stuff like that. And he tries to make a compelling case as to why, like, he's always got his brother's back and that he should have been the hand of the king, not some random schmuck. They're all leeches. So the show is, I think, intentionally trying to give the whole mystery aspect by not giving that much information. That's why I also think that it had him do that horrific stuff in the city, but also the show goes out of its way to obfuscate information because it's trying so hard to make it a mystery. But the problem is like, it's just very forced here. Like, it's one of the things, like, if you're going to show us his perspective of him doing these things, then you need to actually show us his perspective of him doing these things, not just like a piece of the puzzle, because it's very clearly trying to make this big deep thing as the schism has developed between both the brothers.
The schism is a bit forced again because we don't really know anything about their history with one another at all. It needs more build up. It needs a lot more build up.
Yeah, there's no pacing here, and I think that's the problem. It's too much, and then bunches of exposition of the king exposition. They also really rip off Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, or maybe even a little bit of Frank Herbert's 1984 Dune in the beginning intro, with the narrator just doing this massive sort of exposition dump. Now, I'm not opposed to that, but it was just one of those things where it was very Tolkien in the way it was done and how it was sort of pulled off, because if you remember, like, Fellowship of the Ring, Galadriel is like basically informing the audience about the thing about the ring, the seal door, and the story. They kind of just copy paste that exact formula of just doing it, and the way it's presented, the voice actress that's doing it feels just kind of the same in every aspect.
Maybe, though, they're like, okay, maybe this is just them getting the housekeeping out of the way. To be the devil's advocate again, maybe it's just like, okay, this is the boring part, let's get this out of there, and then we'll get started. But I feel like you need more of a connection to the intrigue that's going on here, first and foremost.
Yeah, it would be nice if they actually at least focused in on a character. Let's compare this again to Game of Thrones season 1, episode 1, right? Where it's building up Ned Stark and his family. It focuses very closely on a single family and doesn't really bounce between the other characters too much because it's building up this core group of characters in this house, right? The Starks. Here, it sort of does a similar thing, but it's bouncing back and forth at such a rapid rate that you never really get a sense of who anybody is. And I hope the next episode really slows down its pacing, because we need to start building up more rather than basically they're trying to do all of season 1 in like one episode here, or at least half of season 1. Like, it's just rushing to the inevitable conflict, because it's coming. There's gonna be a civil war. Like, you can already tell that much.
That's the issue too. In Game of Thrones, there was a sense of impending disaster on the horizon, something coming. It was a thunderstorm. Here it's just like, you're already in the thunder, boy. It's just waiting to see how it unveils itself.
Yep. There's no pacing, there's no building, because with Ned Stark, it was like the building up of like what happened to the King's Hand, Like, it's the slow uncovery of all these different factions and King's Landing. Here it's too clear cut, and it's too stale. And it also just uses the same, like, trappings that they did again. Because I feel like they're also just pulling too much on their previous success, trying to imitate it. And I think by doing so, I think they've, what they're doing is they're becoming very creatively bankrupt here. Like, it's just kind of boring. It's just the same story, different characters, skins, if you will. Literally.
There's also a point that needs to be raised about the actors here, too. These actors did not do very well. They were not impressive in the first episode. Now, granted, the acting in Game of Thrones Season 1-2, if you rewatch that, is not necessarily all that high level. There are many new actors there that are still very much so growing into their roles, like Sean Bean does an excellent job, as he always does, right before he gets his head chopped off, as he always does. Nikolai Costa, the guy who played Daemon Lannister, he too started out rough, very rough, but he grew to be a fantastic portrayal of that character over time. Here, like, you've got Matt Smith, who I don't like the way he looks right now. In the armor, he doesn't look like a Targaryen. He looks ephemeral. Like, he would make an excellent elf, honestly. He would make an excellent Lord of the Rings elf, perhaps, but
yeah, I'd say that, yeah.
he looks too flighty here for a goddamn Targaryen warrior prince. And to be fair as well, put anyone in a silver wig and they're likely to look ridiculous, but
Yeah, that's true. The wigs look... The sets, too, that's worth mentioning as well. The sets, Arch told me that they actually reconstructed a lot of sets to give it an earlier time period, because it's set like 172 years before the events of Game of Thrones. And I think that's really good on paper, but something they did about the sets came off really sort of plasticky.
yeah, a little too new, if anything.
It was
too recently
serviceable.
constructed.
Like, the CGI and stuff was serviceable until you got close-ups. Like, the dragon, when it got close-up, was a little bit on the, oof, let's keep that at a distance, please. It does not look so good. And the outfits were very mixed for me.
Yes.
Like, some of the knights looked really good. Some of them looked really bad. Especially with the prince's outfit. That was not good. That
Again,
was,
no
pain.
visor. No goddamn visor on that thing. In a jousting tourney, like, the splinters in his face would be very sad.
Yeah, and God forbid the joust actually accidentally goes, in on the near the face. It's not going to be deflected. It's going to go in.
Also, there were... So, again, some of the costumes look pretty good. Others of them looked really bad. Like, when the king is in his bedchamber and gets his visit from his soon-to-be queen, as you can guarantee, it looks like a modern-day sweatshirt. Like, there's no seams, there's no stitches on it. It looks like a dude in his, like, 40k studio building a Minas Tirith replacement or something.
That's a pretty apt description. It didn't...
Like, he's
If you
working
look
on
at
his
his-
wargame board.
Like, he's like, we're going to have a battle here. We're going to have a tournament for this battle next week. As he's, like, chipping away at his styrofoam.
His enormous styrofoam castle. Like, I swear to God, there's a zipper on that goddamn thing. Like, no, like, I think there is. Like, okay, all right, you can't see it, Colin, but I'm gonna bring it up for the audience here. Like, you can see those little sweatshirt things, those little bead things down the side. You can see the zipper. Like, I swear to Jesus, they just gave him a white sweater and it's like, okay, come on, we need to shoot this scene. Like, snappy here.
Yep, it was not good. Came off as tacky, to say the least. The outfits don't look good across the board. They're just bad. The sets are serviceable. You have some armored suits that look okay, and it doesn't. The whole episode felt like there was a lot of money. You could feel the money thrown into it, but it just felt like it had really no gravitas, if you will, like no pull or sway.
It feels like a Game of Thrones show after Game of Thrones was a thing. That's what it feels like. It feels like it's lending the aesthetic, which is not what a prologue should feel like at all. It should feel like the aesthetic originates here.
Yeah.
The acting, I think, is going to be a problem. Again, I don't like the portrayals of the main characters. Emma D'Arcy is playing Rahirimon. She too just looks weird, and that's mean to say, but it's also true. Like,
That's true. No, you noticed how they have her intentionally look like Daenerys?
yes, like, she's very Daenerys. I'm like,
Like they're like, guys, look, it's totally not Daenerys Targaryen. Like the way they have her get up, the actress in question they picked looks almost identical in a lot of ways aesthetically. Especially if you look at like a glance, the hair, the style.
They even go out of their way to highlight Daenerys' name in the prologue to it. It's like, Daenerys Targaryen, do you remember her? She went a bit batshit there.
I remember. Do you remember the other show? I remember. They're trying hard on the member berries. That's true.
I am not a tremendous fan of the actors they picked here. There is no Jon Snow in this set, in my opinion. There's no Littlefinger. There's no Tyrion. There's no Jaime. It's all just kind of people who are totally important. The show tells me. Rather than show you, but yeah.
Oh, that is a huge problem, the telling. And because it's so rushed, then there's no showing. Like, my overall feel from this episode, to be brutally honest, is it's not interesting. It's kind of on the boring side of things. And it borderlines on some areas on the bad, with the overt, like, poking at misogyny stuff and putting in gender politics in there. Like, it's just, it's very distasteful in my mind.
Current year.
The forced diversity hire on top of that, and the fact that they go out of the way to tell you that we're only putting this guy in here because he's black. It's like, that is the most unironically racist thing I think I've ever heard. But okay.
It is, but such is
Fair
the current
enough
year.
show. And that's the problem. I think that's another issue. This show might have had a chance had it came out around the same time Game of Thrones first started airing, because that also started airing a little bit before this sort of infesting of forcing, modern day politics into TV shows really started to hammer in hard. So, and see it in every aspect, as the show is just dripping with it. And they're not even subtle with it here. There's no subtlety even with it when it comes to the symbolism about being pregnant is a battlefield by just having a battle happen during the pregnancy, having violence and murder happen during pregnancy, and showing that there's blood in both. It's like, yeah, show, we get it. Like, there's no subtlety at all. There's no clever storytelling. It's as if it's written for children.
Little bit too rushed almost in a way. The art directing could definitely do better, so could the wardrobe, and it's all shot in that Battle of Winterfell style, where everything is just a pinch too dark, like they've decreased the vibrancy by 10 plus points, and it's just like, why?
We wanted to give this aura of dark, so we put a filter over everything that was dark. That way you could tell it's dark.
Yes.
Okay, show.
Everything is dark. Great.
Thank you for the riveting camera. Oh,
I'm not ready to sell the show straight down the river just yet. My primary complaints are pacing, which is non-existent, and acting, which was also kind of awful in Game of Thrones Season 1 in many cases, so maybe the intrigues will make up for it, but the problem is the battle lines are already pretty clearly drawn between Rhaenerya and Daemon and the Tower, the High Tower's people. It's like, it's... we'll see. Maybe there'll be some good twists here, but...
The thing is, sometimes it takes a show a season to find its footing, and that's not uncommon with a lot of shows. About a season. So we'll see how it misfalls here, and if it's salvageable by the end, then we'll really know if this show can actually be saved. But it's not off to a strong start. It has room for recovery, I think, easily, if it slows down.
It's got some promise. Like, again, the overall execution isn't terrible. It's just I do raise a lot of questions about the casting choices, the general story, and the pacing of the first episode.
And I think we're just going to have to wait and see for the next episode. And hope that they find better footing there.